Okay. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all. Happy New Year. I'm Fenella Saunders. I'm the editor-in-chief of American Scientist magazine. This is Science by the Slice, which is a seminar series we've been running for, I don't even know how long, decades. We do this in collaboration with Science Communicators of North Carolina, which helps us plan our events. And we get funding from the NC Biotechnology Center, so we always thank them for our pizza. So we can't do this without help from other people. So we like to thank everybody who works with us to make these events possible. If you ever miss any of these events, we do tend to post the videos they go up live on Facebook, on the Sigma Xi Facebook page. So you can always join if you can't come in person. We also tend to post videos and interviews on the American Scientist website. If you missed any before and want to go back, that's where you can find them. Just one quick announcement before we get started. We usually do these on the first Thursday of the month, so look at these through May, and then we take a summer break and then we'll start all over again. I'd had somebody inquire about other speakers we might look into, so if you ever have speaker recommendations, we're happy to receive them. Just one thing about Sigma Xi, in case you are a Sigma Xi member and want to know, Sigma Xi's annual conference was virtual last year and will also be virtual this year. So we don't know how people's travel funding is going to be for the next little bit. So they're doing that to increase accessibility. So if you are somebody who has students who want to do presentations at the annual conference, please know it's going to be virtual this year, so you can get in your materials with that in mind. So today we're going to have a really fantastic talk from Matt Bertone. He has promised me that he will put all the disgusting stuff at the end. So please finish your pizza quickly, a late stomach. Matt Bertone is an entomologist who specializes in arthropod biodiversity, taxonomy, and systematics. He is the diagnostic entomologist and director of the NC State Plant Disease and Insect Clinic at North Carolina State University. And he's going to talk to us about the good, the bad, and the wacky of what he does out there. So thank you, Dr. Bertone.
Thank you so much for the invite. I'm glad to be here speaking with you all. And I should note that I am not primarily a researcher, so this is not a very data-heavy driven type of talk. I'm mainly an extension at NC State, where I provide information for all different people. And I'm going to start out with this. Just look at that and see, would you be able to recognize this if this was handed to you? These are very small structures, but don't yell out if you know what this is yet. But we'll come back to that. Okay, so take a look, but we'll come back to that. All right, so I am the director and the main entomologist, the entomologist at the NC State Plant Disease and Insect Clinic. We just moved our lab actually right over by Centennial campus of, not on Centennial campus, but right next door at NC State in Raleigh. We're a diagnostic lab that deals mostly with plant problems. So sick plants or pests eating your plants, you submit those and we identify what those are and help you get help to either manage them or prevent them. I also get a lot of household pests as the entomologist. We work a lot with cooperative extension. So each county has extension agents who are out there to help clients, either growing food or growing crops or just having homeowner issues, things like that. But we do serve the public, private industry, government, and academia. In fact, anybody can submit a sample to us for diagnosis. So if you're doing a research project and something's attacking your things, you can submit those to us and we'll figure out what they are and figure out a plan to help you out. There is a small fee for service, but we're funded through the state and through the National Plant Diagnostic Network, which actually is a network of labs like ours. So basically every state has a lab like ours, if not a few labs, where you can submit these samples to get the diagnosis. Just a summary of what we do and what we saw in the lab this year. So in calendar year 2025, we had over 2,700 samples in the lab. And we also have a turf diagnostic lab. This was from 524 different hosts. So different types of things, of plants, of situations, things like that. From almost every single county and from many states out of state. And you can see the breakdown here. So we accept image samples, physical samples, or both. And so we can look at photos. If we could diagnose from them, we'll tell you what it is. We sometimes need the physical samples, especially for microscopic organisms. And you can see home grounds on the top right is the most common. We get a lot of field crops, golf courses, greenhouses, container nurseries, and lots of different situations these samples come from. So it's very fun because we get a variety of things to look at, but it is challenging sometimes because of the diversity of things that come in that we may not be familiar with. In fact, yesterday I got truffles for the first time grown here in North Carolina, looking at them. So yeah. Now, my general responsibility is to provide accurate identifications of all the insects and other arthropods and sometimes other animals, as you'll see, submitted to the lab. So I'm the main person that deals with the leggy things, or actually I deal with all the animals except for nematodes, which we consider diseases of plants in the lab. I do communicate the findings to the entomology specialists in the department for their management recommendations to give to the client. My specialty is identification, not killing them. Although I do kill a lot of insects for collections, I mostly put them in the freezer or in alcohol, so that doesn't really help a homeowner when they've got an infestation of something. And so I could be the most annoying person ever, where I could tell you exactly what something is, but not what to do about it. So, and that's what everybody wants to know. How do I kill it? We also train county agents and extension master gardener volunteers to recognize and identify arthropods of importance. I also provide entomological support for others. So if anybody just has an interesting question about biology or something like that, I often help them find references, figure out what's going on. And we do recognize and report regulated and or invasive organisms. So when we get them in the lab, if we recognize this is something new to the state or the country, we have a protocol. We have to report these things so that the government, local and federal, can go out and react to it. So what I do is mostly, for arthropods, I mostly rely on experience for identification. So many organisms I've seen before, I can immediately see it, send out a report, we're done. And I have a broad interest in many groups. In fact, the students make fun of me because everything's my favorite, in quotes. So they say, oh, you say, oh, it's always your favorite. But that's because I like a lot of things. I most often use morphology-based dichotomous keys to identify things. And so looking at the actual structures of the insect to tell what type of organism it is. And sometimes there's special prep needed. So I'll have to slide mount certain specimens, especially very small things like mites and scale insects. And right there in the middle of the page is a wing of a tiny, tiny wasp. The wasp is about 1 millimeter long. And then sometimes we do DNA sequencing. So if there's something very difficult, or if it's a life stage like a maggot or something that we can't identify based on morphology, we'll grind it up or extract the DNA. We will then sequence a barcode gene, usually CO1, the cytochrome oxidase 1 mitochondrial gene. And there's about a 600 base pair region that is often used to identify different insect species. So it's kind of like a barcode. You can then put it up, blast it online in GenBank. We would compare the sequence with others and say, okay, it's this species versus that. Along with my diagnostic duties, I have passions for obviously specimen curation and submitting these specimens to the collection. So things that come through the lab, especially really interesting or very nice specimens, I will curate them, we'll pin and point them. This is kind of very fun, artsy stuff that we get to do as entomologists. But they are very important scientific specimens that are labeled accurately and put in our insect collection. And our insect collection at NC State has about over 2 million species, or specimens, sorry, many species from all over the world. I also am very passionate about photography. And so most of the photos in this talk are mine. You'll see whether or not they're labeled as such. And if you want to know later on, I have a Flickr page if you'd like to see some of my photos. And then, although I'm not a researcher per se, I do collaborate a lot with folks, especially when they need help identifying things, or even my photography is used in their publications. And so I collaborate with a lot of things, or new findings I find that I need to get out there. I will publish notes on certain biological or kind of distributional kind of information on new pests, or just an insect that we found that's doing something interesting. Okay, so what's the good part of my job? So I do really love engaging clients with diverse backgrounds and needs. I really love talking to everyone. I really like kind of opening their eyes to entomology and helping them out. So many people are actually surprised that our service exists. I wish more people knew about our service. And most are very grateful that we're there, because this problem has been persisting. They're spending lots of money and people are giving them different answers, and they come to us we don't have a bias. We're not trying to make money off this. We're a state organization. So, and I just want to help people. So I have no ulterior motive. And I do feel like I'm actually making a difference, especially given my expertise. I never thought I'd get a job where I could just look at bug photos and tell people what they are and then geek out about it a little bit. And then they're very happy about that. So, and then they pay me for that. So that's really cool. And you do this at various levels. So on the top left, that's our window to the lab. So in our new lab, we have this huge window with a rolling shutter and people just come up and drop off their samples. That's my desk with the scopes and the computer and all my books up top. And I do have a phone, a landline. And when I answer it, you'd be surprised how many people said, I can't believe I got a human. And that's nowadays, I guess, because most of it also is email. Lots and lots of emails, of course. We can't avoid emails. I really do enjoy teaching people. In fact, I got into entomology because I love them, but I also wanted to get a PhD because I wanted to teach. I never formally became a formal professor teaching, but I do guest lecture often. But extension is amazing because you do get to teach. It's all more on a smaller level, individual level often. But I get to train the people that are out there in the state and in other states and internationally about how to identify certain things so that they can empower them to do it and help folks out there because I can't be everywhere. We do get webinars and all these things, and we really, really enjoy it. I do love fostering entomology, or at least arthropod appreciation, or at least maybe don't hate them so much or don't squish them so much. And especially things like spiders, which people obviously fear. I keep a black widow at my desk, often a live one that I feed and show people. I've had brown recluses that I keep alive and things like that because they're very misunderstood. And I want people to get a little bit up and close to them to realize that they are not these bloodthirsty critters that are going to kill everybody on sight. And I love talking about strange things, the things that you've never heard of, because everybody's heard of butterflies and dragonflies and things like that, and all the things people get tattoos of and whatnot. But I'm going to talk to you about mites and weird little wasps and weird little flies and things like that. One thing that might be strange for you all, but for me it's really fun, is successfully rearing insects. So I get these insects in, sometimes they're babies and I can't identify the baby, but I want to grow it up to be an adult. So it's fun feeding them. Now this one is a cheating one because it already came as a pupa there, you can see. But this beautiful moth, this raspberry crown borer, this beautiful hornet mimicking moth that actually destroys raspberry and blackberry plants. So both beautiful and destructive. Of course, if we didn't care about those plants, nobody would really care about this moth. But it was really nice to be able to rear this, have this perfect specimen, be able to photograph it, all that stuff. But if I can rear them even from an egg all the way through, that's even more amazing. It's kind of also an art more than a science sometimes. And discovering something new. Of course, scientists always want to discover new things. So that's really, really what it's about. And people bring me things, and then I happen to recognize that this is something new. So for instance, this is the pecan carpenter worm, but it's in a filbert, a hazelnut. So I never published this. I probably should. And if you're out there and you want to publish it, go for it. But I found this really cool. There's a wood-boring caterpillar in the family of carpenter worm moths. And this one was in a hazelnut, but that was not a recorded host for this species. In fact, these hazelnuts are grown for truffle growth. They stress them out. They grow huge orchards of them so they can grow truffles on the roots. And this one happened to have pest pressure, both disease and insects. And so this is a new host record for this moth. Let's discover new interests. So how many of you all have ever heard of an Areophyid mite? I guarantee you almost nobody online or everywhere has. But and I really didn't know anything about these until I got into this job. In fact, my education and my background is more in medical veterinary entomology, urban entomology, and systematics, taxonomy, and things like that. Plants were kind of a little interest, but once I got in the lab, I had to know a lot more about plants and things like that. And there's a whole group of mites that only feed on plants. They're very, very diverse. There aren't many specialists out there, and there's so much more diversity than can be described. But you can see they're very tiny. So those scale bars are 1/4 of a millimeter. So they're like dust when you look at them. You can't see them by the naked eye, but when you zoom in, you see these beautiful mites that have these really crazy wax structures on them, or fuzz or fur almost made of wax. And once I started to understand these things, I was like, they're really cool and they're really amazing under the scope to look at those structures. And that leads me to then recognize things like new species. So this is another hazelnut that was brought in. The ag agent brought huge amounts of these trees into the lab. They were just piling them into the hallway outside. And the pathologists in the lab were collecting all the diseases off of it. And I was collecting all the insects. There were lace bugs and scarab beetles and all these things feeding on it. And I zoomed in on one of the leaves and I noticed this little mite. I was like, of course, I'm now interested in these mites. And so I slide mount it and identify it to genus. And it's this genus Rhynchophytoptis. I'm sure you all guessed that. But I looked in the catalog and there was never a species of this genus found on hazelnuts. So I sent it to my Russian colleague, who is a world expert on these mites. That there is now the holotype, the type species of this. This is a brand new species to science, never described, and we described it. So I'm now an author on this species of mite. So this is Rhynchophytoptis corla vagrans. It doesn't cause actually damage to the plants, and this is probably why nobody notices them. And again, they're also about 1/4 millimeter long. But it's a vagrant mite, they call it. So they just walk around, they feed, they don't cause any noticeable damage, but this is why they're not noticed. And it's not just mites. We get weird organisms through the lab, and we got this one. This was a flatworm, very charismatic. Yeah, I know. It just looks like a piece of wet leather, I know. But this is a flatworm species. It was sent to me from some nurseries and some other areas in North Carolina, a few different samples. I collected them, sent them up to I sent photos to some experts. We assumed it was one species, Obama nungara, not named after our former president, but the name of the native peoples of South America, word for leaf animal. But anyway, we thought it was Obama nungara. Then we sent it off to the federal, to the USDA for identification. Their flatworm specialists had recently retired, so they sent it off to France to an expert who I knew on social media. Years later, he's starting to look at this and finds out this is actually a new species of flatworm. Now, we don't know where it originates from, but the type locality is actually here in North Carolina now, even though we know it's not native to here. So very strange, but really amazing. So again, I'm now an author on this species as well. So it's pretty fun to find new things. Okay, now to the fun, there's the bad. Now, the bad is not just things that are bad for me or annoying or whatever, but also just bad for the environment. There's definitely some things where people bring them to my door and say, whoa, that's cool. And they're like, yeah, it's eating everything. So my idea of bad is not necessarily everybody's idea of bad. But one we all have to worry about are invasive species. So invasive species come into the state and the country all the time. People move materials around, they move food around, things like that. In fact, I just looked up, since I started in 2013, we've had 21 new arthropods in North Carolina that we've documented through our lab, and that's just through our lab alone. Some of them are just kind of there out in the environment, they're not causing harm, others are. So this, for example, is an auger beetle. These are wood boring beetles that came from wood packing material, wood pallets from India that were on machinery that was sent here. And they start to emerge. Now, luckily, these don't survive in North Carolina, so we're not too worried, but they do establish in other areas. And you can see it can be as simple as bringing back a wooden toy from another country or another continent, like Africa, and then somebody says, hey, what's this sawdust coming out of my thing? And they bring it to me, and they're, again, filled with these beetles, these large beetles and everything. Again, luckily, this species is tropical. We don't have to really worry about it here. But it was something that I was worried about. We would contain it, report it, try and track back all those things to make sure that they don't get out and destroy what we love here in our country. Now, there are a lot of expected pests, of course, out there. I don't know how many of these you've all heard of. So emerald ash borer, we've got sugarcane aphids, we've got crepe myrtle bark scales. So if you have a crepe myrtle right now, you will get bark scales on your tree. It's no doubt. And they will kill a tree after a while. They'll stress it out, it'll make it look terrible. The problem is we planted these exotic plants here all over the place, and then the pest isn't here and they look great. And then one year, at some point, a pest comes, it's not controlled by anything, it explodes and then eats all the plants everywhere. How many of you all have heard of spotted lanternfly? That's probably the most famous invasive pest, and it is now in North Carolina. So you will be seeing it also on your doorstep very soon. And one we're expecting to see is box tree moth. So how many of you have boxwoods in your yard? Well, you won't after that comes, because these moths, these caterpillars consume the plants and just completely destroy them. So these are unfortunately things that happen with human commerce and kind of movement of materials all across the world. There's also unexpected ones, things we're not on the lookout for. This was this pittosporum out in the eastern part of the state was starting to get contorted and get really sticky and all this stuff. The nursery people thought they might be thrips, but the local ag agent was very astute and noticed that they were jumping plant lice. They sent them in, looked at the database. They're very specific they have very specific hosts. So if you know what plant it's on, you can find a handful of them that actually feed on that plant. So I was able to recognize this was a species that was from the old world, from Asia. It was introduced into California, I think, in 2009, and this was the first time on the East Coast that it was found. And as soon as I was about to publish the paper, people from South Carolina contacted me, said it was there, so I had to readjust the paper a little bit and I think it's pretty widespread now in the Southeast. We also have native species that move. So I think from climate change, a lot of the more southern species are starting to move up north. And so they start to creep into our southern border here in North Carolina. These two both were found. Oh, that's not laser anymore. This moth, a palm feeding moth, and then the scale insect, both are native species, but we didn't see them very much at all before, and now they're becoming more abundant. Fire ants are a classic example of that too. We're still recording new counties in North Carolina where they're moving to because it's more amenable to them nowadays. And then things that maybe are reemerging, we don't know. This is a weevil. The larvae there on the bottom right were boring into the petioles, the leaf stalks of rapeseed, canola, which is used to make oils. The seeds are used to make oils. So it's not very well grown here in North Carolina, but sometimes it is. And the plants were melting out there in the field. That was because the weevils would bore into the stem and water was getting in, maggots were getting in, all this stuff, and just kind of completely killing the plants. This weevil has been in the US since 1895. The world expert on weevils I contacted to confirm my ID, he said he had about 4 specimens in the million specimens of weevils he had. He was one of the biggest collectors ever. And so he wanted me to send him some because it was so uncommon, even a weevil expert didn't have it, but we have now them causing damage in commercial fields. So this was one where we even had to bring in some of the samples with the larvae and pupae to see when they might be emerging, because we don't know any information to know when to find the adults, when to find the larvae, when the damage is going to happen, when the best time to control is. So these are complete unknowns. Luckily, most of my job stops at, this is Cutarincus pallidactylus. This is what it does. This is what it feeds on. Here's some information from other countries, but beyond that, I got to move on to another ID or something. All right, human and animal parasites are fun, huh? So, anybody know what these are? Okay, one's a bed bug, one's a bat bug. Both are in the same genus, both can be in homes. One feeds only on bats, one feeds only on humans in homes. Which one would you rather have? Bat bug, obviously. But how do you know when you got to pay $1,000, thousands of dollars to heat treat your home for bed bugs, or if you just need to wait to exclude the bats from your house and then they'll go away? So you got to figure out which one. So if you said the one on the left is the bed bug, that's correct. The one on the right is the bat bug. Does anybody see any differences? It's the body. Yes, it's the body. No, but yes, so the bat bugs are actually hairier. So they have these long hairs on the side of the pronotum. They also have much thicker hind legs. And so those are the two characters I tell people to take photos of and send me, especially if they can't collect specimens. But usually they can collect lots of specimens of these. And you don't want lots of specimens of bed bugs, believe me. Now, some really annoying things. So this graphic came out from the CDC. Chagas disease, more than 300,000 people in the US are infected with Trypanosoma cruzi, and most don't know it. How would you feel reading that? Yeah, well, they failed to mention that 99.99% of them traveled outside the US or immigrated here, and that's how they got it. They got it outside the country, but they didn't say that. So, of course, that makes mass hysteria, which means I get a lot of questions about kissing bugs. And so I have to write blog posts about kissing bugs and the reality of them in North Carolina. And that's an actual kissing bug that was sent to me. I almost let it feed on me, but it died before I made the smart choice of not letting it feed on me. But these are about inch long blood-sucking assassin bugs, basically.
What countries are people at risk?
They're throughout Central and South America, but there are many native species in the US. In fact, we have 2 species in North Carolina that are native. This is a native species. It goes up to almost Pennsylvania even. So it is around. But the problem is people aren't good at identifying it. So you get this mass slaughter of all these look-alike bugs, which hurts me because these are harmless insects. And so what happens is without clarifying this, it causes mass hysteria and people just crush anything that looks like a kissing bug. Or luckily they send them to me maybe first when they're alive and I can say, no, that's a deep-footed bug, that's something else. And this happens time and time again. So the top 2, I definitely found a murder hornet. No, the one on the left is a European hornet. It's been here for 150 years and it's very large and related to a murder hornet, which is the northern giant hornet. And we've got cicada killers, which are native, very, very large wasps. Both of them are not murder hornets. So how many of you have heard of the murder hornet? See, everybody's heard of it, but would you be able to recognize one? Probably not. So I have to write guides on how to do that. Will this thing kill me? On the left, the hammerhead worms. Well, they produce tetrodotoxin, which is the pufferfish toxin, but I calculated you'd have to eat a few of them. How many of you are going to eat a hammerhead worm? Nobody. Okay, so don't worry about it. But I'm still going to get a call about it, of course. And jumping worms. Help, I have jumping worms. Well, they've been here for a long time. We really don't know what to do about them. I'm sorry I can't help, but so people freak out about these things because they hear about them without a lot of context. All right, finally, the wacky. So specimens from strange sites. So what do we have here? What fruit is this? Berries. You notice about them?
There's something inside.
Something inside the calyx. Well, it looked like fungus from the photo, but it's nice and cottony and fluffy. What could it be? Well, you get the specimens in, you break it open, there's baby spiders. There was yeah, I mean, it's not great. You could eat them, it wouldn't hurt you. It would hurt them, they wouldn't like that. But this mother spider felt like these little spots were really nice little secluded spaces to lay their eggs and make their egg sacs. All right, so then we got this one. This is the description. Found a child's hair when mom was shampooing. Mother thought it was a flea, as she found one a couple of nights before and could not retrieve it, but was able to salvage the sample I mailed you. All right, what do we think this is going to be? Probably not a butterfly, not a spider.
Head louse?
Head louse, that would be cool. I would have liked that because I don't have photos of head lice yet. I do have photos of pubic lice though, which were submitted. But the beetle. Now this is huge on the screen. This beetle in real life is only a couple millimeters long, but this is actually now Cibius repandus. It's a flat bark beetle. It is the only specimen now in our collection of this species, which is funny. So thankfully that kid's hair caught this specimen for our collection. And it was in very good shape too, so. All right, now this one is in both the bad and the wacky categories. And unfortunately it's wacky for most people, but for me, it's almost a weekly thing. So, excuse me. So there's a thing out there called delusory parasitosis or delusional infestations, which is much more common than people think, but unfortunately only basically dermatologists, general practitioners and entomologists hear about this. So this is where people are convinced that they're infested, either things are crawling on them, biting them, infesting their skin, their eyes, their mouth, things like that. They come up to the door sometimes wanting me to dig things out of them and look at them. And it's not obviously my favorite part of the job, but I have become interested in it. I'm more part of a working group. Many people blame bird mites, these very tiny mites that infest bird nests. They'll feed on the baby birds, blood suck. They'll come into homes sometimes when the birds fledge. This is actually my home right there at the top right. That's my fingers with those. In fact, I got them on me that night and they were biting me, which was a lot of fun. But this is how cavalier I am. But they do exist, but it's very rare that you actually have bird mites. But they're very tiny, and so people think it's invisible. I can't see it. It must be, must be a mite. But the problem is it's caused by something else. It could be stress or even a little bit of psychosis, but it could be neurological damage. It could be drug interactions. It could be new detergent. It could be dry skin. But unfortunately, people are convinced, and after a period of time, after about 6 months, it becomes locked in their brain, and it's impossible. You can show them evidence or say that we can't find anything, and they'll send in things like all these bottles of liquid saying they're infesting everything in my house, every liquid, or cases full of stuff. You even get samples like under boob and between teeth, which is fun. And actually, I should mention, A few months ago, I got actual teeth in the mail, which was fun. So, somebody thinking these things were causing their teeth to fall out. Now, it's a very serious problem. A lot of people kind of push them off. Dermatologists to just prescribe a skin cream to kill whatever's in there without actually addressing the fact that it's probably not an actual pest or oral parasite. So it's a very difficult situation. I get about 1 or 2 calls a week of people like this. So, and it's almost impossible to convince them that it's not the case, even after they submit sample after sample. And in fact, most of the time when they submit samples, I call it the everything bagel sample. So it's like if you just kind of scraped all the toppings off an everything bagel, put them on tape and submit them. They're looking for any little thing that could be a parasite. And after collecting, they'll never find one because it's not there. So very, very difficult situation. But unfortunately, I feel like it's my duty also to talk with them and be honest with them because not many people are, and I don't mind doing it. I've spoken to hundreds of people about this, so it is that. So that's not even that strange for me, but I guess the strangest case ever was this one. So please make a detailed inspection of the eyes, antennae, head, wing structure for anything unusual or uncustomary. I'll be picking up the samples after your dissection investigation. As you'd agree, the Navy is not going to publicize their spy technology on the internet. Thank you for dissecting these 2 samples with an open, investigative, scientific mind. So this person, fortunately, they were seeing the wrong person. They came into me and said, I think these are listening devices. They used a giant ball of aluminum foil, and inside was a jar with a dead cicada. I cut it open, showed them his muscle and fat and all that stuff. And they proceeded to bring out another cicada. I was like, okay, I'm not gonna do this. This is obviously not a listening device. But they had read online that the cicada program of the Navy is where they made the link. But the cicada program from the Navy was actually basically like pieces of paper with little kind of paper airplanes. There was the close-in covert autonomous disposable aircrafts, not an actual insect cicada. So unfortunately, I do have to, we're kind of a lab where people just randomly contact you about certain things, hoping you can help them out. Many times I can, but in this situation, I don't know if I help them out, but I did produce a nice long report on this so that they're for their satisfaction. All right, so finally, advice for becoming a diagnostician. So get familiar with a lot of arthropod groups. Knowledge of plants really helps as well. Practice keying out specimens. You will not escape keys and descriptions. In fact, one time I had to go back to Linnaeus's original description of the German cockroach, which is in Latin and 2 sentences long. That's interesting. Hone your techniques for finding literature and other resources. Build relationships with other experts. Luckily, I've worked in a bunch of different groups and with a lot of different organismal experts. And so we have good relationships with them. So if I don't know what it is, because I definitely don't know everything, I will send them photos and things like that, and they can help out. And nothing compares to experience. So being in the lab for over a decade, seeing these things come in, saying, oh yeah, 5 years ago I saw this thing, or 10 years ago I saw this thing. I might have to go back and figure out exactly what it was, but I can usually recognize these things. But just looking at, I've probably looked at easily hundreds of thousands of insects over my life, if not a million, maybe by now. All right, so I know you're all wondering what that thing was. Beginning. Oh, there's 2 things. Now, those 2 little structures are often associated with each other. They are from 2 different organisms, though. I'll give you a clue. Do you remember what it looked like? Okay. Does anybody have ideas?
They look kind of like a millipede.
Kind of like a millipede. Now it's very tiny. Often they're fragmented too. So there, I'll show you again. There you go. It kind of looks like a millipede. And then the other thing looks kind of like a dried up grain of rice. They are very small, a few millimeters long. The one on the left is the fecal matter of a flea. So the coiled red thing, that's basically dried blood that's been digested and pooped out. And the right is the proglotid or the egg-bearing segment of a tapeworm. And I don't know if you know this, but tapeworms are transmitted by fleas. So when animals eat a flea that has the eggs in it, a cat's grooming itself, it licks up a flea. It then can get a tapeworm. And then what happens is the tapeworm grows in the intestine and then sheds pieces of itself that go out of the cat. I'll let you guess from where. And I've had people say, I had illusory parasitosis case where the person said, these are all over the place, all over my bed. I'm like, yeah, they're all over your bed because your cat's probably in your bed and you've got these things shedding in your bed, which is disgusting, obviously. This is why I'm glad you're all not eating yet. But when I see these now, the first time I saw it, I was like, what is this thing? What is that? And I was testing and all. I brought it over. And then now once I saw it, I'm like, okay, that's proglotid. And I have a little vial of dried ones in my lab and all this stuff. So yeah, so if you see that, you would never know these two things are associated unless you have the experience, good or bad, of seeing them. But to give you a little eye bleach, a little cleanse, the coolest thing I saw this year, the field crops entomologist sent me a text message, a photo from a grower who just photographed these things. And it's like, what are these things? They're eating this plant, this weed, whatever. I was like, ooh, those are cool. Those are clown weevils. I've never seen those before here. So he sent me a whole bunch of them. I went to Centennial campus, collected some of this plant that can be considered a really bad weed in agriculture, and brought it back and photographed it. This is a native weevil. It looks like it's tropical, but I love this native. It's the Hispania clown weevil. There's a few species here, but really beautiful iridescent scales, really cool organism. And in fact, it was really nice because the grower was actually happy about these because it was going to eat these weeds. So he was apparently like Johnny Appleseeding, taking them to different plants around. Like now he's cultivating these weevils, but he didn't know. He didn't know what they were doing. So anyway, it's a pretty cool species. And with that, I will take any questions.
Take questions. I've got one from online, which asked about human parasites, which you answered a lot of, but they specifically asked about botflies or scabies.
Yes. So I was gonna put a botfly on here too. They're very cool looking insects. Now we do have native species of botflies. In fact, while I was home during the pandemic, one of the master gardeners out in the east found a rabbit botfly, and I was like, "Ooh, it's alive." They're like, "Yeah, it is. I have it." It's like, "Can you send it to me?" And they sent it to me in a box. I got photos of it. I got the specimen, all that stuff. I also got sent soft ticks, which I'd never seen, which are really cool and gross as well. But yeah, botflies. So the human botflies, and that's actually some of these illusory parasitosis cases do claim they have botflies, or now screwworm flies, which is that emerging. It's been around, but the eradication program is now. I don't know all the issues, but you've probably heard of now the New World screwworm, but you may have not have heard of them before. But there are a few flies that will invade human skin. The botflies, what they do is they're only found in Central and South America. The mother flies capture mosquitoes and other flies and lay their eggs on them. And so you got to watch out for mosquitoes in the tropics, also for the botflies, because when they land on you and feed, the warmth of your skin causes the eggs to hatch, the botfly maggots drop and burrow into your skin. So they live under your skin, they breathe out the surface of the skin. I will say, if I ever got one, I would probably rear it. I'd probably let it come out. And I know a couple entomologists who have let them grow out, and you get these little flies. Now, the rabbit botflies, ironically, are like twice the size of the human botfly, and they also can be found in mice. So it's like you've got this fly that's this big that's developing in a mouse or something. So those are luckily, they're not a concern here unless you're a squirrel or a mouse or a rabbit or something like that. Now, scabies, that's a mite that burrows under the skin. It is not technically considered an entomologist. Like, we wouldn't diagnose it in the lab because it's a subcutaneous. So we rely on medical professionals to do so. It's much rarer than people think, and that unfortunately, people blame that very often for the illusory parasitosis also. And I don't know if you all know this, but you have mites in your faces also. All of us have mites in our faces. Sorry if you just found that out, but everybody on Earth basically of a certain age has mites living in their pores of their face that come out and reproduce at night and things like that. So yeah, sorry everyone. But here's the thing, if you didn't notice them or didn't know about them, then your life has not changed at all. So don't worry about it, but it's an amazing symbiosis, I guess, or whatever. Yeah, so, yep.
Go ahead, Bob.
I get confused when reading news reports about the status of sort of native bees and then honeybees that are used for agriculture.
Yeah.
They're carted around.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the different stressors of those two populations?
Yeah, so Yeah, that's a interesting one. Now there are a lot of researchers on bees and pollination and stuff. That's also a group that I shy away. I do like bees in general, but in some ways, but more the native bees and definitely, honeybees I consider livestock. I mean, don't shoot me or whatever, but I consider they're domesticated animal here. They're not native, things like that. So when you say save the bees, well, now we're moving luckily toward save the native bees because the honeybees are not native anyway. So I mean, but they do produce honey and pollinate, so they are important in a lot of ways. But the native bees are very diverse and they do a lot of different things. Some are the only pollinators of certain plants because they have built this association with each other. Many of those do have different pressures and different needs. So honeybees are going to be in hives. So they're wild honeybees. Sometimes they even nest in homes and walls. It's way worse than having wasps nest there because the honey will seep into the walls and it's really expensive to fix. But in general, they're kind of nesting in certain spots. A lot of the native bees nest in the ground, are solitary nesters in the ground. They dig holes and they may nest in areas in abundance, but it's more of like an apartment complex. They're all kind of nesting together in a suitable site. So when those areas are destroyed, you're destroying native bee habitat. Also, a lot of native bees nest in the stems, the piths of dead plants, or like if you break a plant or pruning plants, you got those piths. They'll hollow those out and make their nests in there. And of course, a native bee that people really don't like is the carpenter bee because they attack people's homes. And I say, well, what would they normally attack? Can anybody guess what a carpenter bee would normally? What's that?
Trees.
Trees. Where are the trees? Took them down to create our houses. So sorry, that's your fault for building a house there made of wood. And so I rarely ever see natural carpenter bee nests, but carpenter bees are also pollinators, so they are important that way. So I like to always describe the reality of it, not the kind of bias like, oh, they're destroying my home. Well, they also pollinate. What do you care about more and things like that? And are they going to be really that bad for your home? Now, there are people researching that stuff. But yeah, so bees are really interesting, very diverse group. They're also parasitic bees that parasitize other bees, like they steal the resources from other bees, so they don't actually do the work themselves and stuff. So bees are very diverse. Mhm.
Other questions? Go ahead.
What is your opinion on like naturalized species such as the Chinese mantis?
Yeah, so I mean, well, it's a practical thing. There's no getting rid of them now. So there's no point in really stressing about them. The ecological damage has probably been done by now. So this is kind of one of the things we unfortunately have to deal with. That's why we focus more on detection and prevention or eradication when they do come in. If we had known that the spotted lanternfly had come into Pennsylvania when it did and were able to eradicate it, maybe it wouldn't have spread, but unfortunately it did. So it's here to stay. So it's kind of like, no use crying over spilled milk at this point because it's like, the damage is done. It's the same with the hammerhead worms. People think because they're in the news lately that they're this new thing. They've been here for almost 100 years in various spots. It's just people seem to be noticing more. There's a lot more with the internet. There's a lot more recognition of things like that. So, and mantises in general, I like to, especially those, people like love them. And then I do remember when I was younger, everybody in the neighborhood knew I loved bugs, and I was playing in a friend's yard, and these kids come riding up on their bikes, and they throw their bikes down, they run to me, and like, Matt, I saw a dead praying mantis on the road. Somebody squished it. We got to go arrest them, kind of thing, because there's the notion that it was illegal to kill mantises, and I was like, well, even then, I was like, I knew it was not a native one, and I was like, well, it's not native anyway, so it's like it wouldn't be illegal. We do have plenty of native mantises. But mantises people love. They're like, oh, I'll put them in my garden. It's going to eat everything. Well, it will eat everything because they'll eat not only pests, but they'll eat bees and hummingbirds and other things anything they can eat. So that's why we also kind of talk about the differences between generalist predators, the specialists, and things like that, and all that. But once they get here and are established, and if they're not eradicated, I honestly don't feel like there's much use in worrying about them at that point because there's nothing you do. It's nature. They're going to start to spread. But it should teach us not to reduce those risks and those ways that these things do become invasive. And so this is why it's really important. Many of the pests many things we introduced way back when were introduced, I think apparently the European hornet, that big hornet, the basically huge inch-long hornet, more than an inch and a half long hornet, I think was introduced to help kill forest pests in like the 1800s. And that's what they thought, oh, it's great. We'll just bring this. It'll eat all the pests. It's like, no, it eats everything. Or there was a fly that was brought in to try and control what we call now spongy moth, but the gypsy moth. And it was a parasite of them, but it also parasitized every other moth around it. So we think that that's the decline of the giant silkworm moths, the really big, beautiful moths like Luna moths and things like that we have around. So we really have to, now there's a lot more knowledge, but I'm sure we're still gonna make mistakes, and there's always accidents and always things coming. So, yeah.
We have a lot of online questions.
Okay.
I'm gonna ask one of them before we move on to the, one of which is kind of funny.
Okay.
When you rear baby bugs, do you give them names?
I'm bad at that. In fact, I didn't even give some of our spiders names, which I feel bad about, but we do. Our current spider is named La Viuda, which is the widow in Spanish. So named by Mike Munster in my lab, who's a plant pathologist who speaks Spanish. He's from here, from Minnesota, but he lived in Mexico for a long time. So he found it in the lab crawling around. We get the plant samples in, they have all different things on them, including black widows sometimes. And it was crawling around and I was like, oh, well, I don't have one right now. So we scooped her up. She was a little emaciated. So we fed her and now she's happily living in the lab. But I don't name them, unfortunately. I also, they're just going to be put in the freezer and put in the collection anyway. So it's probably not good to get attached, honestly. So yeah.
Do we have any other questions from the room before I ask more of these online questions? All right, I will go through these then. Will emerald ash borer problems eventually burn out in the USA?
Ooh, that's a really tough one to know. It'll always be here, I think. Now it is fairly specific to ash, but it will attack fringe tree, which is also in the olive family, and maybe some others that we might not know yet about. I don't know its expansion yet. I don't think it's fully expanded to the west, but it's basically in the eastern half of the US. It's very abundant. We do have researchers at the university and other universities that are looking at this pest, and they are finding that there are some resistant trees, and these will survive and maybe grow, but it's really tough to tell. I doubt that they will completely eradicate ashes because, from the pest, but it's really tough to know what's exactly going to happen.
Next question is, do you see any fig wasps?
Fig wasps, I don't see. Actually, I would love to. I don't have any photos of them. I think most of the figs that we have around the university and around that most people plant, the edible figs, are not wasp pollinators as far as I know. I think they can grow the fruit without them. I'm not a horticulturalist, so I don't know exactly. But I would love to see them. They're really interesting. I love getting photos of things. That's a whole family of wasps that I don't have any photos of. So yeah, but I don't see any. I would like to.
The next one is, would you talk about the kinds of microscopes you use for the photos that you take?
Yeah, actually, most of these photos are taken with an SLR camera, so with a macro lens, with the diffused flash and everything like that. The very tiny, the mite photos, like the very tiny microscopic mites. I'm not a huge fan of the cameras that come on scopes. What I did was actually the reverse. I scavenged some, and this is because I was into photography and kind of DIY and kind of just tinkering. I adapted some cheap microscope lenses, compound microscope lenses, objectives, to an SLR body using some, pieces that I put together. And so I have a system that has a very high magnification lens. It has a very shallow depth of field, so we do stacking. So I have the camera on a robot. I say, here's the top of this specimen, here's the bottom, click go, it takes a photo every time. It takes like 60 photos in that range of like maybe a couple millimeters. And then we use software to stack them all together. So different things require different types of setups, but for the most part, I use either handheld, camera with a macro lens, and a couple other lenses sometimes, or I use kind of microscope objectives attached to a camera.
Our last online question, and if anybody else has questions after this, what do you say to people who might be freaked out by eating berries because of the little worms are now spider babies inside blueberries?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know. I think people just need to chill out a little bit about things. I think they're a little too. I think people are a little too they get in their mind about these things when you're like, okay, well, if you hadn't known that you ate it, would you be, you only grossed out after the fact. It didn't actually hurt you. It didn't taste whatever. Now, obviously, I'm gonna clean off something like that. Or I probably wouldn't just go and eat it. But unfortunately, this is the real world. There's, even the government allows a certain amount of body parts of insects in your food. It has to be, because there's no way to completely make sure that no insects or nothing is in your food. So sorry if you're, now finding that out too. I know, I told you, I'm gonna gross everybody out, but like, for instance, I'm not an entomophage. I don't really like eating insects. There are a lot of people that are really into eating insects, all that stuff. That's not really for me, but if I was hungry enough, I would, and it'd be, fine. But I don't know. I think people, and it's just the same thing with fears about things like spiders and whatnot. It's like, I think once you get more used to the reality of them, or kind of get up close to them and observe them and just know that they're not actually as scary as you think, because what's in your head is way worse than what's in your corner of your house or something. I don't know. I think people, if they just kind of set the emotion aside, or let yourself have that emotion first, but say, okay, that's just me being freaked out about something. Why am I freaked out about this? Okay, that spider has lots of legs. What inherently is bad about having a lot of legs? Or what inherently is bad about that? Or my favorite thing is like, my least favorite thing is when people say, I just stomp on that spider in my house. I'm like, okay, so picture yourself as a spider. Or like, if you walk into the wrong place and somebody just says, kill them, that's kind of bad. That's very irrational. It's not cool. And so like, this spider wanders in your house accidentally, it's running around, it's freaked out, and then it gets stomped on. I mean, that's like the worst end of your life ever. So my biggest thing, if I can tell anybody, give advice, it's just realize these are other entities, these are other beings. They're not just a thing. They're other beings. They have their own wants and needs. Now, I will smack a mosquito or kill a tick or things like that. It's attacking me. Yeah, I'm going to defend myself. But that spider's not attacking you. It does not want to eat you. It's very frightened. And you be the bigger, both literal and metaphorical person, and capture them, release them outside. They'll be ever grateful. You may never know. But I don't know. I just think people, their gut reaction is violence, unfortunately, to something they don't know. And we know all that too well for humans and all that stuff too. So I would just say, just sit on that emotion for a second and then wonder, why am I really scared of this little thing that can't defend itself or whatever? So, yeah.
Okay, any other questions or, okay, thank you so much.
Thanks for attending, everyone.
Thank you.
If you have a weird critter, I never